making finance simple for everyday people. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, founder and CEO of Social Impact Now and Connect Up Institute, and managing director of the Integrated Capital Fund, and your resident money doula. On today's episode, it's going to be so exciting. This is a big one. We're going to be talking about the move that most entrepreneurs sleep on, but that can actually make or break generational wealth. And that is succession planning. That's right. How you leave your business matters just as much as how you built it. So first, let's get into the basics. What is succession planning? Succession planning is the simple process, actually not so simple, but simply the process of preparing for the day when you no longer run your business. That could be because you're retiring, because you're selling, because you're passing it on, or God forbid, you're hit with a health crisis or unexpected event. It's about answering one simple question. What happens to this business when I'm not here to run it anymore? And don't get it twisted, succession planning is not just for Fortune 500 companies or for family businesses. Whether you're a solo massage therapist, you own a bakery with 3 employees, or you run a 10-person consultant agency, if you don't have a plan, you don't have a legacy. And this is super, super important. So let me hit you with the hard truth. More than 70% of small businesses have no succession plan. We saw this with Prince, who had no will. And I saw the impact locally when a community restaurateur passed away soon after leaving church after experiencing shortness of breath. And every year, thousands of businesses, Black, brown, women-owned business, rural businesses, not because they shut down, not because they weren't profitable, but not because they didn't have customers, but because the founder had no exit strategy in the event that something happened to them. So let me say that again. No plan equals lost value. That's like working your whole life to build a beautiful house and then walking away with no will, no deed, no keys passed on to the next generation. So now let's talk about the consequences. I'm going to give you real life example. I once worked with a woman who, we'll call her Miss Davis. She built a successful tax prep and bookkeeping firm. 30 years in the business. She was amazing. She had hundreds of loyal clients. Every February, people would be lined up outside her door. She got sick suddenly and passed away. She had no will. She had no business documents. She had no staff trained to run things. Her family had to shut the entire business down. All that equity gone. Clients left scrambling. Community hurt. Legacy lost. And that's not what we're doing over here. As Iyanla says, not on my watch. I'm not going to let you do that. So now I know that some of you are what you're thinking. Let's clear up some of the biggest lies we tell ourselves about succession planning or exiting. I'm too small for that. If you generate income, have clients, sell products, or have any business assets, your business has value. Size doesn't matter. Sustainability does. 2, I'll just pass it on to my kids. Okay, that's great, but do they want it? Are they trained to run the business? Have you even talked to them? Have you written anything down? Hoping is not a strategy. Here's another one. I've got time. Maybe, but life is unpredictable. Succession planning isn't just about an eventual exit. It's also about emergency readiness. Finally, I'm not leaving. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you're not immortal. If you don't want work to drop, what happens when you can't do the work? Planning is important, and it's really about leading. So let's talk about what goes into succession planning. Here's what you want to start thinking about. Who will take over the leadership role? Could it be a family member? Could it be an employee? Do you want it to be a buyer or even a nonprofit? How will the transition actually happen? Will it happen gradually? Will it happen immediately? Will it happen over 6 months? What systems need to be in place? Standard operating procedures, legal documents, passwords, contracts, bank accounts. How will the business be valued or sold? Will you gift it? Will you sell it? Will you liquidate all the assets? What support will the new owner need to succeed? Will they need mentorship from you or somebody else? Will they need funding? Will they need to get clients? This isn't just paperwork, it's preparation. And quite frankly, it's really peace of mind, not only for you, but for anybody who's going to be on the other side of the transaction. Once again, whether it's family members, whether it's a new buyer, whether you're just going to sell everything, having a clear pathway is going to be important. So now let's break down the 4 most common ways folks transition their business, especially if it's a small business or you're in the solopreneur space. So the first one, maybe a no-brainer, is a family transfer. You pass the business to a child or spouse or relative. Common, but that also can be complicated. The pros are it keeps it in the family and may reduce a tax burden. But some of the cons is some emotional dynamics. There could be a lack of readiness, and there could be some entitlement issues. One of the shows that I'm binge watching right now is The Gentleman, and the property after the father, the patriarch, dies. Typically, historically, goes to the first son, and in this instance, it went to the second son. So there was a lot of acrimony between the first son and the second son of who should be entitled to all of the property and all of the businesses that were left by the father. You don't want that. So having a plan and talking about that in advance helps a lot. The second way that you can do this is an employee buyout. You sell or gift the business to a long-term employee or manager, or in the case of a friend of mine, she sold the business to the employees, the entire employees. She had about 10 employees. They collectively came in together and bought the business. Here are some of the pros with that. They already know the company. They already know the business. It's really great for continuity for your clients, but also for the staff, especially if you have part-time and full-time staff. But here are some of the cons. They may need financing that they may not be in a position to obtain. There's a solve for that, so don't think there's not a solve for that. But they might need additional training on actually managing and running a business. Being an employee and being an owner are completely different things. Or even thinking about and talking about co-ownership and what does that mean? Who's going to be responsible for what? Number 3, selling to an outside buyer. You sell the business to someone new. It could be a competitor, it could be an investor, or it could be even a stranger. And I'll talk more about that in the following segments. Here's one of the pros. There's big potential for a great payout. And also, it's a clean break. You know that when you close, you're done. You're done with this business. It was great for a reason and a season, but now you're moving on to the next thing. Maybe it's traveling. Maybe it's spending more time with your family, whatever that looks like for you. But here are some of the cons. Typically, there will be a culture shift within the company unless you're choosing a buyer who you feel is very values aligned, culturally aligned, and will maintain that for the long term of the business. Also, the con is loss of legacy, but sometimes you don't have a choice, especially if you don't have family members who aren't interested in the business. Also, the sales process is going to typically be a little bit, if not a lot longer than you would in other sort of instances. Number 4, being a cooperative or an ESOP, which is an employee self-owned business, right? An ESOP conversion. You can transition ownership to your workers or turn the business into a cooperative. Some of the pros of this is that there's a shared wealth model, there's value alignments, and it's very inclusive in making it very accessible to a wide range of either community members or the employees who are working there. A cooperative, and I just did an episode on cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives, so that can also be an opportunity. Some of the cons with this is it does definitely take more time. One, just introducing people to the cooperative model and understanding how a cooperative works, particularly if you're not necessarily familiar with how cooperatives work, how they're set up, but you're definitely also going to need legal help in getting everything set up and making sure that everything is done correctly. And a cooperative is not necessarily ideal for every kind of business. So you want to make sure that there's alignment in how a cooperative works and the business that is being sold. Each path has its pros and cons, as I've explained, but here is the key. Choose one while you still have the option. You don't want the option actually taken out of your hands, right? So, listen, succession planning isn't just a business strategy. It's actually a wealth strategy, particularly if you're thinking about your family and how they might be wanting to come into the business, right? It's really about keeping the asset in circulation and that all of that wealth doesn't just disappear, right? Whether you're thinking about it's going to keeping that asset within your community, keeping the asset within the family. Hey, it doesn't even have to be a child. It could be an uncle. It could be a sister. It could be a cousin. It could be another distant relative that you know. That is still considered within your family. And so you can sell it to anybody in your family. Now, this is really about wanting to make sure that your legacy and the assets that you have achieved do not just go down the drain. So, here's some of the other benefits of what it can do if you decide to exit your business and do it in the right way. One, you're going to preserve generational income for your family. So if you do sell it and you can sell it with a note, especially if you're selling it to the employees, and that's what my friend did. She decided to finance the sale of her business to her employees. So she essentially became the bank as opposed to the employees going to a bank, getting qualified, knowing that they probably, many of them were not in a position to be able to get financing from a bank. She became their bank. And so now she gets a monthly payment for a fixed amount of time, usually somewhere between 5 and 10 years, based on the value that they sold the business for, right? That could be a pretty good deal. So if you didn't want to work, you still have an income that's coming in because you have financed the sale of your business to the employees, right? Which can be an amazing thing and great for community wealth building. The next thing is it creates jobs and stability, or at the very least, it maintains the jobs that you have. If your business suddenly closes, all those people are out of work and now have to go find jobs. So you are helping by having a plan, you get to help preserve the jobs that they have and possibly create opportunities for more jobs to come, which contributes to the long-term sustainability of the company. One, it attract buyers and or funders, right? So it could be other investors that are interested in your business. The other advantage is that it reduces tax headaches for your family by having it clearly outline of what's happening with the business. Some states actually have what would be a high tax, or it's going to go through probate. And as we've talked about before on the show, probate expenses can be up to 30 to 40% of the value of whatever the asset is. So let's say you have $1 million business. Probate could take up to $400,000 of that. That's money that's poof gone. There's no contributed value to the company that's not passed down. That is legal and court fees and all of what comes along with probate gone, right? As opposed to actually going back to the community, going back to the family, or going back to the employees. Here's the other advantage. It lets you retire with dignity and a plan. And for my entrepreneurs, for underinvested or underrepresented communities, this is one of the few chances you have to break the cycle and keep business assets in our communities. So, what can you do today? You might be feeling right now, Elaine, I'm feeling really overwhelmed from this conversation. I'm having lots of emotions coming up for me in this conversation. Don't even trip about it. This isn't about getting it perfect today. It's about stepping off zero and getting started. And so here's what you can do literally starting this week. Number one, Write down the most important business logins and keep them in a safe place. I like to keep them on an electronic document that may not be connected to the internet, right? So you want to be careful of hackers. Or you might want to write this down and put it in your safe, right? To make sure that the important logins like bank logins, any sort of payment processing platforms that you're using, the logins for those, the login for if you have a CRM, a customer relationship management system, make sure to log in. If you've got cryptocurrencies, make sure you have the logins and all of the passwords for that. Have them written down. Number two, start documenting how you want to set things up step by step, right? Even if you're just not sure exactly, once again, this is about getting started. So just write it down. Write it down in pencil if that makes you feel better. Do people still use pencils anymore? I do. But just start sketching it out. You can always come back to it. And you might want to make a practice of once a quarter, taking a couple hours to start thinking through what does a business transition look like and start getting ideas of how you would want that to look. Number three, have a real conversation with your loved ones about what happens to your business if something happens to you, whether that be you have a prolonged illness, like I shared with you. My son had some illness that he had to deal with that took him out of commission. It could be an unexpected death. It could be incapacitation. What if you break your leg? What happens? What if you are in some sort of traction? What if you go into a coma? Just think about some of the things that you maybe have seen in your movies, or what are the things that you're most afraid about? Those probably are the things that you want to make at least a plan, because part of your fear is that you don't have a plan. And so your fear might be lessened by now creating a plan. And then next, reach out to an accountant or legal advisor and say, I want to start succession planning. That's it. One small step. Okay. So let's recap. We're going to bring it all together. Succession planning is about protecting your business, your people, and your peace and your money. It's not just for big corporations. It's actually for you and security and peace of mind. Waiting too long risks losing everything that you've worked so hard to build. But like I said, you have options. You can pass it on. You can sell it. You can partner up, or you can go co-op. Legacy doesn't happen by accident. It happens by planning. So up next in the segment 2, we're getting into the nuts and bolts of selling a business. Why do people do it? What buyers want, and how to set yourself up to actually get paid when it's time to walk away. You're listening to the Do.Different.Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and I will see you after the break. Welcome back to the Do.Different.Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and today we're talking about one of the most things that is slept on, but is so important, and then most important move in your business, and that is actually selling your business. Yep, that's right. We're about to flip the script from building the business to exiting the business, because let's be honest, your exit is just as important as how you enter. So first things first, why would you even want to sell your business? Here are some of the top reasons I've seen in my coaching, consulting, and funding investing work. Number one at the top is retirement. You're ready to chill, relax, enjoy the fruits of your labor, and finally stop working every single weekend. Maybe you're burnt out, you've hit a wall. Emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, you are done, and that is okay. Maybe there's some bigger opportunities on the horizon. You've built something great, but you want to pursue something greater. Maybe it's a new venture, a different passion, a new market, or life has happened. A divorce, relocation, health issues, caregiving. These can all shift your priorities. Maybe it's just about the money. You've built something valuable and now you want somebody to buy it, period. Okay? Selling isn't quitting, it's transitioning. It's the payday for all the risk and sweat and sacrifices you have already made. With great success, I'm sure. So now let's talk about what makes a business sellable, because not every business is ready for the marketplace or should be in the marketplace. Buyers typically want three things. Profitability. Is the business actually making money? Is that business, is that revenue recurring or is it one off? Is it seasonal, right? Systems. Can someone else step into it and run it? If you are the only person who knows how to do everything in the business, your business is not one, able to be sold, and two, ready to be sold. Nobody wants to buy you. They want to buy the business. And if the whole idea is you're selling it, you don't want them to be buying you anyways, right? Your plan is to leave and go do something else, whatever that something else is. And next, clean books. Are your finances in order? And this is the thing that I find trips up even the most smallest of business. And I'll talk a little bit about that story in a minute, how I went to go buy a business and it was interesting. I'll talk about that in a second. But no shoe boxes of receipts or mystery Venmo transfer. Bonus, if you've got documented standard operating procedures or SOPs, loyal customers and contracts, you are going to be really, really attractive. If you've got a strong brand or an online presence, if you have trained staff that will stay after the sale, those are all things that make you a really, really attractive business, right? And here's the kicker. The more your business depends on you, the less valuable it is. And I want you to really have that sink in. So I'll tell you the quick story. I was interested in buying this business, and when I went to go, this seller was representing himself in the transaction. So we're having a conversation, and I'm like, okay, so tell me about the finances. And he starts to tell me, oh well, while the business has been around for 6 years, the only financials that we have are the sales on Shopify. Now, here's what's wrong with that situation. I now have, well, you can give me the Shopify history. What I don't know is how much does it cost to run the business? And when do those costs incur over the course of the calendar? So I can be mindful of, is there seasonality to the business? Are there certain expenses that come up at certain times of the year in the business? What are the prices of those expenses that I might be responsible for? None of that was tracked. So while the business had really good revenue, there was no way for me to know how much it actually costs to run the business, which now made that business not necessarily less attractive, but I wasn't going to be paying the price that he was asking for because it was going to cost me money to figure out and put all of those systems in place. There's a price that I was going to have to pay for him not doing what needed to be done. So that was going to be reflected in the offer the offer price that I had, which was, I wouldn't say significantly less than what they were asking, but what I ended up doing was offering, hey, then you're going to finance the sale of this business. I'm not going to go to a bank because a bank is not going to bank me on buying this business. So that's just one small instance. So now let's talk numbers. Now that you've built a thing, how do you actually price it? And I know that a lot of people get hung up on this, and but there is a way through. So listen in. Valuation depends on your net income, right? Or you may have heard the term EBITDA, which stands for earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation and amortization. That's what EBITDA stands for. You'll hear people say, what's your EBITDA? What's your, that is really your net income. Each industry has some standards. Some industries use a 2x multiple, a 3x multiple, or even a 10x multiple. There are ways to find out. There are resources, and I'll talk about those a little bit later to find out what is the multiple that you want to target for your industry based on what kind of business you have. The other thing is looking at the tangible assets. So the property, the equipment, the inventory, and then there are the intangible assets, things you can't necessarily touch or feel. And that is the quality of the brand, the extensiveness of the brand, any intellectual property. Do you have things that are unique, that are trademarked, that are copywritten? But also there's what's called goodwill, which is the work, the sweat that's already been put into the company. Maybe it's relationships with clients. You have long-standing relationship with clients. Maybe you are known in the industry as a quality business. Those are going to be things that are going to add to the value or the evaluation of the business. So here's an example. Let's say you own a cleaning service. The annual profit is $100,000. Your industry multiple is 2.5x. That means that the estimated value is 2.5 times the $100,000, which gets us to $250,000. Now, that's not guaranteed, but it gives you as a buyer or you as a seller some idea of what is the range that you could ask for the sale of your business. Maybe it could be more, maybe it's a little bit less based on some of the things that I've just talked about. A buyer may offer less if your team is shaky or your clients are not tied to you personally, you don't have a strong brand. But here's the move. Get a professional valuation early, at least 1 to 2 years before you think that you want to sell the business or you want to exit the business. And once again, whatever that exit looks like, ideally you're going to want a valuation, whether you're going to sell it, whether you're going to transfer it, because you want to have that written down so that everybody knows collectively what is the objective value of the business. You can work with a business broker or a CPA or a valuation expert. I would say the least expensive way to go is probably to do work with the broker, because the broker is actually going to get paid when you sell the business. If you have a CPA that you're already using and they can do that, you can ask them, but not every CPA does valuation. So I wouldn't get your CPA to do it unless they feel comfortable doing valuations. And once again, not every CPA does valuations. And as far as if you want to get a valuation expert, those can run into like the $5, $15, $20,000 range. So if your business is a $20 million business, it might make sense to have an objective valuation expert come in. If your business is maybe under $1 million, that might be something you want to hold off on and maybe go with a valuation done by a CPA or by the broker. Also, the buyer who's buying your business, they may get their own as well. So maybe that could be an option as well. So now let's talk about the process. Selling a business isn't like selling a couch. It's more like selling a house with more paperwork and far more emotions, or maybe not, depending how attached you are to your house. Here's what the process actually looks like. First, prep your financials, your profit and loss statements, your tax returns for the last 3 to 5 years, and your balance sheets. Next, clean up your operations, document systems, start to automate processes, reduce your founder dependency, the organization or the business's dependency on you. The more you can actually defer to a system instead of defer to you as the human, or you can delegate to another human because it's document on how to do the things in the business, the more attractive you're going to look as a business for a buyer. Think about hiring a broker or advisor. This is optional, but it's really helpful because they have a whole entire marketing platform that they can get your business out to more eyeballs if you're looking to sell your business to an independent buyer. They're also really good for vetting buyers. So imagine if you're selling your business, you're going to field all those calls, very similar to if you were to sell your house. You're now talking to every single person who comes through your home. Well, that's why you get a realtor. Well, very similar to a business, you can get a broker. They're going to field all those calls. And ideally, they're going to keep out the riffraff, the people who are not necessarily serious. And they can be, if you know that you're not good at negotiating, they can be really supportive in doing much of the negotiating for you, or at least having a go between you and the buyer for the buyer for your business. And there's lots that are out there. There's Biz Buy Sell, which is a listing. There's Calhoun. There's many different brokers that are out there that can represent you as a seller. But you can also, depending on your business, you might come from a niche business where there's a very small number of people in that business. You might want to just be able to do a private sale by going up to these folks individually and say, hey, I'm interested in selling the business. You have them sign an NDA, and then you can start talking to them about the business. But now it doesn't get out to the broad public that you're selling the business if you're in that niche business. So now let's talk about due diligence. Buyers are going to want to see everything. They're going to want to see all your dirty laundry, right? They're going to want to see contracts. They're going to want to see leases. They're going to want to see licenses. They're going to want to understand the staffing. They're going to want to know what is debt is on your books. So then that leads to negotiation and the offer. You'll need to discuss price and terms and earnouts and transition roles, right? How long do you want to stay in the business to help with the transition? If the buyer is going to use SBA lending, there are term limits on how long you can stay on as the seller to help support the transition of the business. So you'll want to know some of those things. The next part is really around your legal. The next part of the process is legal docs and closing, right? So once there is an asset purchase agreement, the transition plan is finalized, and that means now the final sale starts to happen. Very similar to a house, you're going to have a closing where all that work is now documented and everybody is in full agreement of everything that has been negotiated, and now everybody is signing off to make the actual transition, right? Getting your keys, so to speak. Then finally, there is the actual transition period. You may need to stay on for 3 to 6 months to train and support the new owner. This process can take 3 to 12 months or sometimes longer. So you want to plan accordingly if you're trying to make a quick exit or you're okay with making a longer exit. Now that you know that I've given you the real, let's talk about some of the biggest mistakes really quick. One, people wait too long. If you don't want to wait until you're burnout or sick or panicked, it will show. You'll definitely have less leverage and less time to prep. Two, over-evaluating the business. Just because you need $500,000 doesn't mean the business is worth that. That's why you want to get evaluation. Third, not prepping the team. If your team walks out when you do, that's a red flag to buyers. Typically, sellers won't tell the team, or they might tell only key members that they are looking at selling, right? But it's something you might want to keep under your hat for a while until you absolutely have to. Then there's finally the emotional attachment, right? Selling a business is selling your baby, and nobody wants to sell their baby. But get ready to detach. And please, another mistake is trying to DIY this. Bring in professionals, legal and accounting. This is what you want to do. So as we move into the ending of this segment, I just want to talk about something really, really quick. And that is really thinking about, what does this mean for you? And knowing that it is really okay if you want to exit a business. Maybe you've done the business for 5 years and you're just done. That is okay. I think we don't give ourselves enough permission to just say, like, I'm done. I built a great thing. It's amazing. And now it's time for me to move on. So as we start to move into segment 3, I'm going to be talking about some resources that you can tap into to help you really get your journey started, whether you're on the buying side or on the selling side. And we've already had an episode on how to buy a business. So this is the complimentary episode to think about selling your business. So I can't wait to see you after the break. You're listening to the Do Different Better show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you after the break. Hey everyone, you are still locked into the Do Different Better show. And if you've made it to segment 3, you already know this episode is not just about business, it's about legacy. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and we're breaking down what it really looks like to exit your business intentionally, profitably, and with your head held high. But first, let me break down segment 2. We talked about, people sell their businesses for lots of different reasons, and it's not necessarily just because the business failed, although that sometimes can be a reason. Maybe they just weren't good at it. But here are the things you need to know if you're thinking about selling your business. Buyers want clean books, they want systems, and they want a business that doesn't need babysitting. Number 2, you want to start prepping 1 to 3 years before your ideal exit date. And doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to exit. Maybe you're just like, I want to get ready to exit, but I'm going to stay in the business. But now at least you're ready. The business is ready, even if that exit period is maybe 5 years or 7 years in the future. Next, you definitely want to get some professional support. It is not a solo mission. It is not a DIY. You want to get some help. You want to make sure that you're able to sell with clarity, integrity, and intention. And just as I promised in segment 2, I'm going to give you some tools. There's some great tools that are out there that are low cost and no cost. So here are some that are going to help prep you for a profitable and drama-free exit. So one, there are some brokers and advisors. There's Biz Buy Sell, there's Calhoun, and there's many other business listing marketplaces, very much like realtors. You have Edina Realty, you have Coldwell Banker. The same thing happens with business brokers. There are many out there. You can Google a list and get a long list. Particularly if you want something that's in a niche industry, there are brokers that only deal with particular niches, and you can go that way. Next, you want to think about connecting with the certified exit planning advisors. And this could be really helpful around strategy and valuation. So that is a certification that of people who specifically work with business exits. And then there's also business transition services. So this service can be available at many small business development agencies, SBDCs. Oftentimes they're located at universities. They might be in your local chamber of commerce, but these are organizations, these are state agencies and federal agencies that actually get paid to help people like you get ready for selling or get ready to be a buyer. Then, as far as legal and tax help, there is the Small Business Administration. They actually have an exit planning guide that's available online. Then there's accountants that specialize in mergers and acquisitions, or you may have heard the term M&A. Then there's the small business legal clinics, or SBLCs. They're often free or low cost. SCORE has some exit planning checklists that you can use. And if you really want to start this path, and I think this is a good, no matter whether you're planning to sell or not, or you're planning to exit or not, getting your business onto some SOP system, a standard operating system, and writing them down. There are great platforms like Google Docs or Notion board or Miro that can help you track and have a encyclopedia of all the processes that are in your business. So now we've talked about the resources. We're going to get practical and tactical. It's now time to talk about how do you actually prepare your business to be passed on, sold, or transformed. This is going to be your step-by-step game plan. So first, you want to have an exit planning timeline. That needs to be 1, 3, or 5 years or more out, but you want to pick a timeline, okay? Succession planning doesn't happen overnight. Ideally, you want to begin this process 3 to 5 years before you think you want to transition out, whether that's through a sale, whether that's closing the business, no matter what the exit looks like, or even preparing for a disaster or health crisis. So here's how you think about it over time. 5 years out, set the vision. Start with your why. Why are you selling? Why are you passing it on? Why are you converting it? 2, next, get a professional business valuation. Start to begin your leadership pipeline of staff or family. If you're going to be looking at family members, start to ask who's interested in becoming in the business, who would be interested in taking over the business. And now you can kind of mentor them and have them shadow you. Maybe it's 1 day a week, maybe it's a couple days a month, maybe it's intently while school's out, maybe it's over the summer vacation. You're having somebody learn the business that's other than you, right? You want to begin to create and update your estate plan and your will to account for what's going to happen with this business, even down to who can, how can you sell the business? Or do you not want to go to your competitor? Okay, write that down in your will or in your estate plan. Outline your financial goals with retirement or the next chapter so that you can make sure that this business, you can understand how does this business sale or exit come into play with that. Will the sale of the business represent all of the funds that are going to fund this new life, or 50% or 25%? Start to think about that. This is going to be your strategic runway, and you're setting your target and beginning to back into it. Now, 3 years out, you want to clean things up, standardize your operations, create SOPs, digitize your systems as much as possible, payroll, your customer relationship management systems, scheduling, bookkeeping. Start to think about removing yourself from day-to-day operations. One of the things that I did is I started taking one day off in the middle of the week, right? I take Thursdays off. And what that forced me to do is to think about somebody else needs to do some of the things that I do. And by exiting myself in the business requires me to find somebody else who's going to do those things and train them up, right? Strengthen your brand identity and customer loyalty, right? And there are little things that you can do without adding any money. Maybe it's sending a thank you email every time a contract is sold. Maybe it's sending a basket of wine or something like that. Start to build your brand and brand loyalty and customer loyalty. Next, you can start talking to a broker, an exit advisor, or a small business consultant. Think of this as staging a house before you actually sell. You want everything working, automated, and transferable. 1 year out, this is where you start to lock in, right? Laser scope. This is where you finalize your succession or sales strategy. Are you selling assets? Are you selling intellectual property? Are you selling systems? What are you selling? Here's where you're going to clean up the financials and the taxes. If you haven't filed taxes, you're going to file those missing taxes because they are going to go back and look at least the last 2 years, if not the last 3 to 5 years. Identify and begin onboarding the successor. So now you might want this person coming in a lot more often, particularly if it's a family member and they're in a position, maybe they've just graduated school, they're with their undergrad or their master's degree. Now they can start to come on full time or maybe 3/4 time into the business, right? Document the transition plan and the training process. What are you doing? Are you spending a whole week just on the CRM? Are you spending a whole month on taking this person around to different clients that are existing customers? What does that look like? Create a communications plan for your staff. How are you going to roll out that you either are selling the business or that once you've sold the business? You may not want to communicate that you're selling the business, but you definitely want to have a communications plan of like, where are you going to be going? What are you going to be doing? How involved you're going to be, right? And then it's going to be time to execute. Everything should be ready to hand off with a bow on top. So, one of the most valuable assets in your business isn't your product, it's your processes. Documenting how you want to how you do gives your business legs even without you. Here's what to include in your SOP library: how to onboard clients, how to invoice and manage payments, a marketing schedule and brand voice guide, HR and hiring processes, vendor contacts and order systems. What is your technology stack and your login vault? Using tools like Google Drive or Notion or Trainual can help you with all of this. Your goal: a new owner should be able to follow the manual and run the business. So now, if you want to make top dollar for your business, then you want to start prepping like you're going to sell it. And I think that these are really important and valuable things, whether you're looking to sell the business or not. These are all just really good business practices, right? Even if you don't end up selling it, it's going to be great for your business. It's going to be great for your staff. Because sale readiness means that you have a high functioning business, right? Once again, people aren't buying you, they're buying the business. But if the business is you, the business isn't really as valuable, right? Unless you're planning on working in the business. And some buyers aren't going to want that, right? So you don't want to think about that. So here's how you can create maximum value. You want to create recurring revenue. You want to have a team in place. You want to have low owner dependency. You want clean books, and you want to document strategy, your growth strategy, whatever. Where are the opportunities for growth that you haven't already tapped into? But once again, here's the truth. You cannot do this alone, nor should you. And I've talked about having a broker, having a CPA, having an exit plan advisor. These are all people that can help you really make sure that you don't get the short end of the stick on this, no matter how you decide to sell. There's just too many people who sell their business and regret it later, not because of the money, but because the new owner changed the culture, they disrespected the team, or they broke promises. So don't just hand off the operations, also hand off the vision. So think about, what do I want to protect about this business? What does the leadership going to need, whether it's the new team or the existing team? What impact do I want to have, that I want to keep happening with this business after I sell it? How can I prepare the next person to lead with integrity? One great thing is write a founder's letter, right? Create a cultural playbook. Maybe host a closing circle with the team, right? Do what you need to pass the torch and not just the title. So let me leave you with a quick rundown of the exit readiness checklist as we start to land the plane on this episode. Identify your reason for exit and the timeline that you're thinking about exiting, or just what will happen in case of an emergency, right? This could be a disaster plan, right? Make sure that your financials are clean, they're organized, and they're up to date. Then you want to start documenting how the business runs. And you can do that on a regular basis. Maybe it's taking 1 hour out of every month to document a process. It's as simple as that. Reduce the owner dependency. Talk to and have in your back pocket legal and financial professionals to support you. Next, think about what a potential successor or sales strategy might look like. Then think about what is the next business plan? What are things that markets you haven't tapped into? These are things will go a long way in helping the buyer think about, oh, on day one, here are some untapped or unrealized benefits or markets that you could tap into on day one. You've done some of the thinking for them, but also know what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. If you're missing some of those, there's no judgment. Now's the time to get started. And that's how you're going to do different better, right? So that's a wrap for today's episode of the Do Different Better show. We have talked about all things succession, selling, and securing your business legacy. Whether you're dreaming of a graceful retirement, you're looking for a fat check, or a legacy that lives well beyond you, your exit strategy deserves time and attention. If this episode hit home for you, I want to hear about it. DM me at Do.Different.Better on Instagram or on LinkedIn. Share this episode with someone who's built a business but hasn't planned how to leave it. And make sure you subscribe and rate the show and come back to talk more real talk about wealth, work, and working in your purpose. Until next time, you've been listening to the Do Different Better show. I'm Elaine Rasmussen, powering you to do different better. I'll see you next time.